Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 25th Natural Resources and Environmental Commission meeting. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Tonight, our stand-in chair is going to be Commissioner Jones. Thank you so much.
Of course. So I'm calling this meeting to order. I'm going to begin by reading our statement of civility for the South Pasadena Natural Resources and Environmental Commission. As your appointed governing board, we will treat each other, members of the public, and city employees with patience, civility, and courtesy as a model of the same behavior we wish to reflect in South Pasadena for the conduct of all city business and community participation. The decisions made today will be for the benefit of the South Pasadena community and not for personal gain. So the public participation and accessibility, this meeting is obviously held in person. And if you would like to join via Zoom, there is a link included in the agenda. And public comments are also welcome to be submitted via Zoom. Okay, and with that, let's call the meeting to order. Or let's do roll call, sorry. It's been a while.
First, we have Chair Law. He has an excused absence. Vice Chair Hammond also has an excused absence, and Commissioner Bortz has an excused absence. Next, Commissioner Hussagen.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones.
Present.
Commissioner Siegel.
Here.
And Commissioner Tom.
Present.
Thank you. City Council Liaison, Mayor Cassiati is not here currently. Next, we have Ted Gerber, Public Works Director, present, and myself, Melanie Stepanian, present. And if you would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Jones, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. As previously mentioned, we have some guidelines for public comment. One of the means of doing so is to submit one in writing prior to the meeting. And that can be done through emailing NREC public comment at southpasadenaca.gov. And they must be submitted no later than 12 on the day of the meeting, which is today. Additionally, people can raise their hand over Zoom during the meeting when it is mentioned by our intern that we are accepting comments. So with that, do we have any public comments for today?
We had 2 written public comments, which were included in the additional documents and the additional documents amendment. Would we have any in-person public comments? General public comment.
General, yeah.
Yes, general public comment.
Oh, yeah.
Any general public comments to speak now? Oh, my apologies. So there were no written public comments to refer to general public comment. Do we have any in-person comments or any Zoom comments for general public comment that are not related to agenda items? I'll just give our Zoom participants just a moment. And for the record, our city liaison has arrived and is present. Okay. It seems that there are no in-person general comments and no Zoom general comments. We'll move on to our next agenda item. Okay. Thank you. Includes the general public comment section.
Our first agenda item for today is the public hearing on the 1865 Hanscom Drive tree removal application. Do we have a presentation on this?
We don't have a presentation. We have some documents that we can probably share. This is my first tree removal hearing with the city, so maybe a little bit of guidance from the commission. Unfortunately, we don't have RP with us, who's probably done this many times. But I think the way this should go is I'll give a brief introduction of the item, and then we'll have I think we have the applicant available to, if there's questions. Then we also have members of the public available to speak on it as well. Melanie, are you able to pull up the that additional document? Okay. Sure. So while Melanie's is bringing that up, so we have a hearing for you tonight on the removal of 4 trees at 1865 Handsome Drive. There was an application submitted for this location earlier this year. And then that application was amended to reduce the number of trees that were requested. And that's the application that's being presented here tonight for your review. So of the trees on the site, there are 4 that are being requested for removal. And we've included the application for the removal as attachment 1 in the documents provided tonight. So we'll pull that up. Melody, if you don't mind scrolling down to the first attachment. Yes, thank you. So this application included the 4 trees. There's one Aleppo pine, 1 Italian stone pine, 1 Chinese elm, and 1 coast live oak. So per our municipal code, once South Pasadena had received the application, we issued a notification to the owners and tenants in the locale of the tree removal request. And then we received comments through August 23rd related to this removal. And those comments were actually provided as a public comment on the previous NREC meeting in August, as well as tonight. There was some confusion in the process as to whether the information submitted constituted a evaluation of an arborist evaluation of the reason for the removal. So per the municipal code, city staff reached out to the applicant, who provided an additional arborist report that was received recently this October, and that's also been included as attachment 3 in the documents. So we'll take a look at that in one moment. So again, per the municipal code, chapter 34, city staff is bringing this item forward to NREC to evaluate the application and discuss the removal, both from the applicant and the public comments. There were significant public comments submitted on this item, both in August and for tonight's meeting. And so we could share some of those comments with you. That's attachment 2 in the document. Well, you can just jump to attachment 3. Yeah. Sure. Thank you, Melanies. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, if you could scroll down, Melanie, to the table, the list inventory. Yes. So this is the table that lists the trees on the site. The first one requested for removal here is the Aleppo pine. The arborist comments here is to have the 26-inch diameter tree removed. They've noted an unbalanced canopy, dead wood, root loss, and a broken branch. And so there's photos of this tree, but I'll go through all the trees first before we show the photos. Melanie, can you scroll down to the next page? The second tree listed for removal request is Italian stone pine. This is a 33-inch in diameter tree. It discusses a severely exposed roots from a failed retaining wall, girdled roots, and then roots because of their exposure drying out from wind and sun. The next tree on that list, the third tree, is a Chinese elm. The arborist notes the failing of the roots. And then as you'll see in the picture, this tree is actually arched over and is being supported by the structure that's on the site. And then the final tree for the request tonight is a coast live oak. This is a multi-branch tree. So the arborist added up all the individual branches and it came to a total of 91 for the diameter, 91 inches. This is a mature oak. And the arborist has noted that the tree is hollow. There's some images that demonstrate that there's very large cavities. And the arborist believes the roots to be severely decayed. So let's take a look at some of the photos. Yeah, let me talk about it real quick. So this is the Aleppo pine. The arborist noted deadwood. Yeah, let's keep scrolling, Melanie, if you don't mind. Further notices about the canopy being dead at part of the tree. And then on that, if you can go back up one more, Melanie. Yes, the arborist has a concern about a root flare and its position on the upward and downward sides of the slope. And go one more too. Yeah, and this is that same tree with the root flare. Okay, let's move to the next one if you don't mind. Yes, tree number 20. Oh, are you on that one already? So this is the Italian stone pine, the second tree that's being requested. The arborist notes severe dead wood in the lower canopy. And this is the tree that has the exposed roots. There was a retaining wall surrounding this tree. The retaining wall had failed. And now you can see this tree is, there's several feet of exposed roots above ground. Okay, now we're moving on to tree number 22, which is the third of the trees. This is a Chinese elm. And you can see the tree is at a severe angle going off the hillside. And it's actually resting on the left side of that photo. It's resting on the house. I should add that this is a property where I don't believe the house is occupied. It's a dilapidated house. And then the final tree, number 23 in the inventory, is the mature oak that has several branches and has been hollowed out. You can see some of the openings here. And if you scroll down to the next photo, this notes the most severe cavity, which the image shows is close to 4 feet in depth. So as I had mentioned, there's a lot of community interest in these trees. We've been talking about this process for a little while. Due to the community interests, our staff had met with some of the neighbors to explain this process. And so let me reiterate that. Once we received the application, we had sent a notification out to the neighborhood. We received comments. Then based on those comments, we take a look at the application materials. We reach out to the applicant to gather more information. And then we compile all this and bring it to the commission for their review. So I know that's a pretty brief presentation. There's a lot of probably things to discuss and materials that we could review. I could start here, see if there's any questions in the immediacy.
I guess I would just like an understanding of whether there's a precedent for these removals. Are there any development plans for the property?
Sure. So the way that our ordinance is set up is if there's a development in process, if basically the ordinance says if it's due to development, then we go to a different pathway. We actually do this to the planning commission. And if it's not under development, we go to this commission. So there aren't any development plans per se at this moment. There's nothing been submitted to the planning commission, not to say that there is plans for development in the future, but at the moment there's no planning underway. And so this process falls underneath that part of the code and under this commission with regard to these removal decisions.
Do any of my fellow commissioners have
a couple questions. Am I correct in thinking that the oak is the only native?
I believe that 2 of them are native.
No,
the pines are not native and the elm's not native.
Yeah.
No, so it's
Okay.
the oak is the only native tree. Yeah.
Okay. I guess this is a more general comment. It sounds like the process you just described where when it goes to planning if there's a plan, development plan in place, but it doesn't, if there isn't, seems to maybe require taking it back to the city council or something, because that seems like an awfully easy way to basically clear a site and then be in a mode to develop it without having to worry about the trees. So I don't know the details of the ordinances on that, but it certainly seems like something that should be looked at, because properties like this are going to get developed. I mean, I can't believe that it's not. And it just seems like a shortcoming of the current setup if it turns out that a party is able to remove the trees and then come in with a development plan, versus if they're going to do the development plan ultimately anyway, have that be the process. Again, I don't know enough about the details of that, but it just, as you were describing it, it struck me that seems to be maybe not taking into account the current kind of situation we're in, where land is awfully valuable, and it's hard to see how a property that has a dilapidated house that no one's living in isn't going to get developed.
Sure. So the way the ordinance is drafted now is that the removal criteria and the consideration for removal is the same, regardless of which process you're approaching it from.
Mm-hmm.
What really changes is who's the review authority, whether it's the Planning Commission or Natural Resource and Environmental Commission. And then also the replacement requirements can change. They're greater under the development scenario.
Right. And in that scenario, if you take the trees out first and then you come in with a development plan, the idea is, well, that's the clean slate you're working with. So again, I'm not trying to plan it all now, but I just have that concern that it sort of opens up an opportunity for someone to game the system.
I understand. I think, just speaking from the way the ordinance is written and the intention behind it is that they're under a development scenario, the clear reason for removing the trees would be for the development.
Mm-hmm.
Under the non-development scenario, under the scenario that we're in now, there's limited reasoning for removing the trees. And so typically what we see under this scenario is that the trees that are being requested are some sort of hazard versus,
right. No, I get that. But I just think there's a reality to the way that
it's organized,
that things are happening. And so that's something that maybe, you could bring to council and have looked at it.
As a completely sidebar conversation, we do have an intention to review the ordinance again with this commission. There's a couple things that are confusing that could be clarified. And certainly they were revealed in this process.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's room for improvement in terms of the language.
Thank you.
My apologies for interrupting. Just a reminder to turn on your mics when you're speaking, just for the Zoom participants as well. Thank you so much.
Could I ask who from the city was reviewed and approved the application?
Sure. So there was no approval.
Recommended approval.
Yeah. So Our operations manager, who used to be our park supervisor, Katrina Ruggiero, who is very familiar with these types of, the subject matter. She visited the site, and I also visited the site with a couple of other staff because we wanted to see, what we were looking at. It's, I know we're asking you to do this, but it's difficult to see from just images and things like that. But once she reviewed it based on her experience, she recommended that these be approved, and we conferred on that and agreed.
I guess, are we actually, why don't you go ahead? I have a lot of questions.
So my question was just about the risk to the power lines. I know that's mentioned in the agenda item. I don't see it in the arborist report. It's probably outside of his scope, but for the Aleppo pine, POR determined by SCE, Southern California Edison, as danger to power lines. Do we have any further documentation about that?
I think that was information provided by the applicant. And I don't recall if it was identified in the arborist report.
I didn't see it either.
So we're talking about the Aleppo pine.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the one.
So, you could see the line when you're on site. You could see in the image. I don't think it's specifically called out in the arborist report. It was noted by the applicant, and certainly we noted it on site in association with the condition of the tree that might be an issue. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not.
That's
okay. Yeah.
I gotcha. Thanks.
Commissioner Law, did you have any comments or questions? Okay, well, at this point, I guess I'll start in on my questions unless there's more information you're going to present.
No, and I also just want to make sure that we have the opportunity if there's questions for the applicant, and also, at some point we'll take public comment on the item.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my first comment or question would be, I looked at the pictures and I decided I needed a closer look. So I drove the perimeter of the property, both above and below. And I did notice that the entire site would benefit from, well, a lot of the trees would benefit from a healthy pruning. It's evident that there has been little to no maintenance on them for many years. And in terms of, for example, deadwood on the Italian stone pine, that's natural. If it doesn't get pruned, the lower branches do die. That's what they do. And because it's so crowded around it by other, in its natural habitat, the wind would prune those, but because it's so crowded with other vegetation, it has a lot of those lower branches hanging on. I also noticed that the Aleppo pine did lose a major limb, but it is otherwise very strong and healthy. And it doesn't look like it would impose any threat to the power lines. It could use a healthy prune on where the limb was lost. In terms of the oak, it's hard to see, but in my semi-professional opinion, I think that it is very common to have holes in a trunk of an oak, and there to be some rot. That if you go through an oak forest, you'll see many examples of this. Hard to say whether the roots are rotten or not unless you actually excavate, and it looks like it's pretty impossible to get down there because of all the vegetation. Again, the oak would really benefit from a good pruning. So the Chinese elm I wasn't able to observe. It's too far into the site. Obviously, the roots exposure on the stone pine is significant, but again, I wonder if doing some grading around those roots and infilling would be a better approach than removing the tree. At this point, if there's no plans for development, it seems to be a disservice to the surrounding property owners to expose the site to further erosion without any erosion control measures proposed. And I do worry that we would be setting a precedent for tree removals without development plans. In my 5 or 6 years on this commission, we've never done this. It's always been either a danger to a residence that's inhabited or because we are looking at development plans. I've never seen this happen for a vacant lot without any significant plans for continued maintenance, erosion control, etc. So those are my comments. I reviewed everything on the application. I looked at the site. I have a hard time finding it appropriate to approve the 3 trees that I mentioned. Any other comments?
No other comments relative to staffing. No other questions.
Okay, so I think if my commissioners don't have any other comments, we'll open it up to public comment at this point, unless there's something else. Does the applicant want to have a moment to speak?
If so,
and maybe he could address some of my
yes.
He could address some of my concerns as well.
Good evening. Thank you for considering this application. Let me address the issues one at a time. As regards development, the assessor's office, let me say first, we're trying to follow the rules. And so the rules were make an application. So I don't have any development plans at this moment. To think I'm going to let $1 million lot sit empty forever is probably facetious. But the assessor's office and the maps office in the county have 2 dramatically different ideas on what the interior borders of this lot are. So I have to get their resolution of that difference. God knows how long that will take. So will I develop that? Maybe someday, but not in the next, probably not, certainly not in the next year. And I'm not trying to do this to game the system. I thought I was going to have to plant replacement trees anyhow. In fact, I was told there'll probably be well over 30 replacement trees, 20 or more due to the oak. And as regards erosion, I'm told that while usually you're supposed to take out the trunk, in this case, where there is a hillside, just leave the trunk and you'll avoid the erosion. Plus the planting of this new forest, virtually, will certainly mitigate a great deal of consideration for that erosion. So let me discuss the specific trees. You don't get a good feel from Mr. Gerber's picture of how the Aleppo pine leans over and down the lot. It's not leaning over as far as the elm is. Certainly nothing is leaning as far as the elm is, but this one leans forward. And there are electrical lines down there other than the line to the structure. This is a State Farm told me they didn't care to insure this lot. This is an uninsurable lot, so I have no coverage. If that pine drops onto that line, my liability, I feel, is excessive, and I'm bare. So that tree worries me a great deal. When Mr. Gerber's team did a site visit, the arborist person, I think she was, pointed out an Aleppo on the far hillside that cracked and fell, and made the point that these are brittle trees. So I'd like you to take that into consideration, because that's a tree I worry a lot about. Furthermore, this structure is a mess, and it was a teardown when I purchased it under a year ago. It needs to be torn down. And while I can't get any heavy equipment in there, certainly this thing's on a 15 to 30 degree grade, I will need to get a front loader in there. And the front loader will be going between the Aleppo pine and the Italian stone pine. And I think that will cause some disruption of or challenge to the Aleppo pine's root system as it is. As regards the Italian stone pine, the guy who got this whole thing started was your code enforcement officer, Mandela, who told me to clean up that fallen concrete block wall. And you can see in his letter of violation to me, he wanted that tree removed. So that's what got me started on tree removal. He thought that was a serious risk. The grade here is quite dramatic. And so, yes, it's a nice idea to put some ground around those roots, but there's nowhere to put the ground. The ground will be on Peterson if I put ground there. Peterson is the next street down. So it's a big, beautiful tree. No, because it's the biggest, beautiful tree on the hill. But it's sitting with a third of it unsupported in the ground. I think the elm is a foregone conclusion. The elm has reached its ninth inning, I think. The oak tree is, again, a big, big, beautiful tree. I grew up in Southern Ohio playing in the woods. I appreciate a good tree. But I put my level in there, and it was over 4 feet into that hollow. So this huge tree is sitting on a hollow. Just common sense would seem to dictate that maybe we should start over with that, with another tree. There are six oaks on the property. This is the only one I'm worried about. There are 29 trees on the property. These are the only 4 I'm worried about. But I'm really worried about the hazards involved. May I say that I contacted Southern California Edison regarding the Aleppo pine, and they sent out somebody who they contract with to look at it, and he sent me a text message agreeing that this is a hazardous tree. And I have that text message here somewhere if you would like to see it. So in summary, your code enforcement officer, actually Fire Chief Dunn, your associate, my arborist, and the immediate neighbor to my north side would like these trees removed. Thank you.
I was wondering if I could ask you one question, if possible. Sorry. So do you have plans for development? Is this, or what are your long-term plans? Because I guess I'm having a hard time understanding the urgency behind the removals if there's no plan of action.
Well, can you bring up Mr. Mandela's multiple page code violation report?
So Melanie, that'll be part of the application in attachment 1.
So what's the hurry? Your code enforcement officer gave me a 3 to 4 page list of things to do, and this was on his list. Can you say that again for me? The only one I see real urgency for is the Aleppo pine, because again, I'm not insured in this. I can't get insurance in this lot. Section 4. Please remove all the weeds and excess vegetation. Please trim or remove all plants. This includes, in the very center there, this includes obtaining the necessary permits to trim or remove overgrown, decayed, diseased, or dead trees. That's one of his lines. There are other references to it in there. So what's the urgency? Well, he got me involved. To answer your other question, I'm 77 years old. This process could take me a lifetime. But I have twin grandchildren. And if my son has to pay for private schooling for these little twins, it could run him $750,000. But if I can build a house on that property for him, he would be $750,000 ahead right off the top as soon as he moves in. So my purpose in owning this lot is schooling for my grandchildren. But there are only 2, so there's no particular hurry. Thank you.
I guess we can open it up to public comment now.
Do we have any in-person public comments? If you would like to speak, you can go to either of the podiums and you're limited to 3 minutes. Thank you. Just a reminder to click the button when you do arrive. But we did have 2 written comments that were included in the additional documents packet.
Press. Am I on? Okay. Well, there's a lot of things to say and not nearly enough time. I think I described everything in the documents. I hope they were read. I could respond to some of the things the developer just said. I'll just say what I came with. At the end of May, the day after I received the first public notice, I went down to planning, trying to find the plans usually accompanying a new construction tree removal permit application. While planning was running around trying to find documents that didn't exist, the code enforcement officer came out of his cubicle. He began lecturing me about the danger of the Italian stone pine. I asked him if he was an arborist. He said no. I asked him if he knew anything about trees. I can't recall the exact wording, but his response included mention of the city arborist. I've since learned that the city arborist has absolutely nothing to do with private affairs. Later, when I asked to have a conversation with the code enforcement officer, he refused to speak over the phone. He obliged an in-person meeting at the planning office, but strangely kept his palms face down on the table the entire time. Mentioned his past employment in law enforcement and refused to answer almost every single one of my simple questions, but instead encouraged me to file a public records request. His response to the city clerk included, and I quote, "For open code cases, we release the initial complaint and the inspection photos. As these open cases may lead to civil and criminal proceedings, we do not release any additional information. Therefore, I do not know the contents of the conversation between developer and code enforcement." In August, I attended a Zoom call with several concerned neighbors, the director, and staff. The director described standing next to the Italian stone pine and remarked that it was very exposed. When I asked him if he was aware that the developer had demolished a retaining wall in that exact spot, he admitted that he was not aware. I do not know the contents of the conversation between developer and director. The good news is that all the trees are still standing, and discussions with my own arborists have me confident that at least the two most important trees on the property, the Italian stone pine and the live coast oak, can still be preserved. That means that this matter, as messy as it may have been thus far, can still be resolved without too much further complication. I hope you all can agree. Thank you. With my final time, let me just say the Aleppo can be pruned so that it isn't a danger to the lines. Edison offered to do something. When I called them, they said that they generally only prune, they don't remove. And in this case, it does seem that would have been an option. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other in-person comments? Are there any other in-person comments? No. Okay.
We'll give our Zoom participants a moment to raise their hands if they would like to comment. Just about 5 more seconds if anybody on Zoom would like to comment. So we had one in-person public comment. We had 2 written public comments that were submitted and included in our additional documents, as well as the additional documents amendment. And we have no comments via Zoom. With that said, I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. It will be the plastic-free and zero waste guide for city events. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
So sorry.
That's
Let's do
okay.
commissioner discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Law, do you have any thoughts you would like to add?
One, I would like to say, I feel for the process that you have to go through because it is a lot to get these many different approvals just for a tree, let alone when you eventually try to build something. You are going to face a lot more barriers. So I feel for you. That's one. Two, there's a lot of competing opinions on this one. Seems code enforcement, there's a staff assessment, and the owner's arborist all agree that these are trees that should be removed. And yet we also we know things that weren't commented on in some of those documents that were talked about here as far as erosion, trimming, and potential that these can be saved. And so there's a lot that I'm not quite sure of where to land on. It feels like there are a couple of trees that don't look so good, and that could definitely use a severe trimming, and might need to be removed. However, I'm not, I can't make that assessment based on my expertise, and have to look at those experts that are here, and they're based on the arborist decision and the staff assessment. It seems that those should be removed. So I guess what I would like to say is that if we could save some of these trees through trimming, through pruning, and come back and see how it may look down the road, that would be ideal. But some of them, like the Chinese elm, which looks like it's about to fall over, I feel like probably should be removed. But I would like to hear more of my fellow commissioners' comments.
I think I'm in a similar boat to my fellow commissioner here. I think that the challenge I have not being an arborist is not knowing and not having the arborist who issued the report on behalf of the applicant here to answer some of these questions relative to whether trimming or, trimming the dead wood and doing these other things would be enough given the current circumstances, leaves me in a position where I feel that, we need that additional information to make that decision, just because absent that, it leaves me saying, well, especially in the absence of development and knowing what the ultimate plan for this property is, it leaves me saying, well, why would you take a tree that might still be savable? And again, I know the arborist put in the report what they put in, but I have questions that I'd like to ask in order to know, well, what's their professional opinion? Similarly, I guess with city staff, if they're an arborist, then I'd have similar questions and just try to get more information. I mean, South Pasadena being the city of trees, it leaves me saying, well, I'd hate to be in a position where I take trees out just to take them out. I do agree that the Chinese elm seems to be the one tree that in the circumstances makes sense to, given the way it looks. I mean, again, I don't know that an arborist needs to look for that one. That one I feel more comfortable if I were to approve of any of them. That would be the one I would be most comfortable with. But the other three, I don't think I have enough information yet in order to make a decision. And again, in the absence of the arborist being here, it leaves me saying, I'd like to know more before we make that decision.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree that this feels a bit premature in terms of, I appreciate that you've been working on this for quite some time, and I am sorry that it has become so contentious in the community and that you had a bad experience with our code enforcement officer and that there's been so much contradictory information. That's a really unfortunate turn of events. I think it would be really helpful for us to have a better sense of what Southern California Edison's position is on this tree. Can the limbs be pruned back? Does it need to go because it's going to tip onto the line? That would really be very helpful to I'm not comfortable with a text message or representation about what a text message says, if that's a really important justification for removal of that tree. And I don't know, obviously it's not within our powers to be sort of dictate what happens next, but it would be probably beneficial to, if some of the community members could be permitted to come onto the property with an arborist that they've retained to take a look at these trees and provide a more independent assessment, that might help to give us a bit more information. I have to say that I'm a bit uncomfortable with, and I wasn't here at the time that the original application was submitted, but it was 14 trees and now it's 4 trees. And I think there's some, justification being made at this point about future development needs and about the equipment that will have to enter the property, which is somewhat speculative given that there are no plans at this moment to develop the lot. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. I'm pretty much in the same spot. I'm a little confused about the process that the property owner has been put through in terms of the code compliance dictating removals. Generally, in the tree hearings we've seen as a commission, there's it's for either some sort of hazard to a structure or it's potential development. And there's always plans in place, and usually it's brought to us from planning. In this instance, until we know what's going to happen on the property, I would hate for you to remove all these trees, plant new trees, and then have to remove your newly planted trees because you're during the process of site planning, you realize that you've planted trees where you would like to site your structure. So to me, it seems like you're putting that the city has forced your hand in putting the cart before the horse. But I don't know the whole sequence of events so well, so I don't feel very comfortable ruling on this. I do think that there is some doubt in my mind about the health of some of the trees. I agree with my commissioners that the Chinese elm looks rather precarious, but I worry about, the erosion. I worry about loss of carbon sequestration and all these other things that affect our environment and our habitat and the views that need to be considered as well. If these trees are savable, it would be a shame for you to incur all the costs in removal and replanting when there's a less costly and more community accepted proposal. So I'm a little confused on how to rule on this one, to be honest.
Ted, can I ask a question? What are the city rules here when in regards to he has code enforcement telling him he has to remove the trees? And what happens if that does not happen?
So, I think the best way to answer that question is to look at the actual violation from code enforcement. Now, normally, that wouldn't be something that we would share. The reason it's in the packet is because the applicant chose to include the notice of violation in their application, so it's part of that available package. So I think, Charles could correct me, but I think we're referring to the inadequate landscape maintenance section of the notice of violation. So I think, so this basically says, please trim and or remove overgrown, decayed, diseased, or dead trees. This includes the tree causing the failure of the retaining wall. Your arborist must obtain the necessary permits to trim or remove overgrown, decayed, diseased, or dead trees. So I think the statement from the notice of violation is general in nature about addressing the issue. Unless I'm unaware of another communication, I don't know if it specifically calls out the removal of the tree. And that's just me reading the documentation that's part of the application. Does that help answer the question? Do you want to add to that? Oh, no, I'm.
Okay.
And I just wanted to bring to your attention, if you are to visit the site, due to Brown Act violations, we would
Yeah.
have to split up the commission into 2 groups of no more than 3.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I was going to mention that as well. Did you have additional things you wanted?
You know, all I was going to say is, again, first tree hearing, but, you know, in plenty of other, public decision-making processes, I've been through. So I think if you wanted to, qualify, a motion about, needing the need to obtain more information about the issue, and then certainly there's an opportunity that we can make, you know, a site visit happen if that's what the commission, in terms of seeking more information, needs to do. We can facilitate that.
So I think we welcome a motion at this point to continue this item to another meeting. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I did want to give everyone the opportunity to bring up any questions or issues that they would like either the city or the applicant to resolve in the interim, so that we can have all the information available at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That way we won't have these big question marks over our heads. So I will let my commissioners each take a minute to say what those questions are.
If I could, following up on my fellow commissioners' question, Mr. Gerber, if I understood what you said correctly, relative to the code enforcement versus what the application to this commission is. What I heard you say was effectively that code enforcement said, fix this problem generally. It wasn't directory in terms of this tree, that tree, the other tree. It said, fix the trees and do it with the arborist, the city arborist, and the appropriate application process to do whatever needed to be done. Is that what I understood you to be saying?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, so there may not be a conflict in the sense that if what the code enforcement person said was that general, effectively it was applicant or property owner go through the process of doing what you need to do. The concern being dead trees or lack of maintenance of the landscaping, fix that. But it was fix that consistent with whatever needed to be done relative to tree removal or tree trimming or whatever else. That's what I understand.
Yes, and that's my understanding of what the applicant has done here as well, is that has gone through the process, you know, obtained an arborist opinion,
right,
submitted the documentation, and gone through that process.
Right.
But it is general in nature as far as the violation comments.
So if this works out, if that's how we're looking at it, then there wouldn't necessarily be any code on this issue. I don't know if there were other issues on the code enforcement matter, but on this issue, if it gets resolved here or through this process, then there wouldn't be a code enforcement issue on this issue remaining. It would really have been resolved through whatever process the applicant has gone through, as opposed to gone through here, as opposed to there still being a pending code enforcement. I think that's what my fellow commissioner was concerned with, was is the applicant, property owner, going to be in a mode where, gee, you know, my tree removal permit got denied, but I'm stuck now with this code enforcement issue saying, you know, I need to fix it. It's sort of the fixing it is with this tree removal process that we're in right now.
Sure. So, you know,
does that make sense? I'm not sure if that makes sense.
You know, in not speaking for the code enforcement officer, I'll do my best. My understanding of the question was, is the decision put before the commission need to be based on a direction from the city to do something specifically.
Right.
And I think if that were the case, we wouldn't have followed this process. So I think that the applicant is correct in following the process that he is.
Yeah.
But I think it should be clear what the representation of the code violation.
Right. Okay. All right. I think I understand. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Okay. And then I think that relative to what I would want to have staff come back with in terms of additional information, or to have us have presented to us, I think it really is a fuller understanding of not just should these trees be removed or not, but really address the issue around, are there alternatives to removal, such as trimming? Again, there was an indication, for example, of an uneven canopy. Can that uneven canopy be evened out through trimming such that the tree is still salvageable? I don't know. I'm not saying I know one. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying address those issues, as opposed to my sense of the report being more, well, these trees are a problem, therefore they need to be removed, seem to have been the conclusion more than that intermediate step of, is there an alternative? I'm not saying there is. I'm just saying I would want city staff and or the arborist, or I actually want them both to weigh in on that issue and whether that's resolve, how they come down. I think as to the oak tree in particular, I think that's the particular concern. I guess I would like more information on this issue that the chair tonight raised. Well, yes, there is a cavity, but is that as detrimental as it's being presented to be? I too have seen oak trees that have large cavities in them, and they're not always, about to die. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm not an expert, but I'd like to know more on that issue in particular. And then again, just generally on the other three trees, I think it's really a matter of what are the alternatives that might be available that could keep those trees in place. So that's what I would ask.
My one question is, so as I recall, the process before was you bring in your independent arborist, they assess, evaluate things, and then the city arborist evaluates that report and then does a site visit if necessary. Do we have a licensed arborist in the city to do that?
So that's close to what my understanding the process is. Our city arborist is actually a consultant. It's West Coast Arborist. And we don't normally have them visit private sites for evaluation. It's certainly possible, but it's not something that we normally do. So the process is to have our city staff who are familiar with the subject matter have the make the assessment and then make a recommendation to the director, and then I would make that assessment. In some cases, I would make a decision. In some cases, I'd bring it to the commission. In this case, obviously, bring it to the commission. The staff can consult with our city arborist on the issue, and I think there was a conversation about this site, but it's not something that we have the city arborist, do an assessment. Like we pay for different level assessments from the city arborist. We don't typically have that done and an official documentation provided. It's something more of a professional consulting service and asking questions of the city arborist. I know in the past we have had a city arborist on staff, and so it might have been different, but that's how it works with our current resources.
Okay, I guess my recommendation would be to get an independent assessment done, as similar to the process we used to go through, because unfortunately it's become a very contentious issue, and I think in the past, the city arborist could come in and just sort of do the checks and balances. I'm not a licensed arborist. I've studied arboriculture and I work around arborists all the time, but I threw out my 2 cents, and everyone can do that. But until you have an actual assessment done from an independent licensed arborist, I don't think we can really truly move forward on this, because that's what the process used to be with the city. So I don't know whether it's using our contracted arborist through West Coast, or if there's another means of doing so. And then I'm also curious about the code enforcement write-up. If obviously the property needs a good cleanup, and there's a lot of invasive trees noted as being preserved. I'm a little confused as to why the code enforcement wouldn't first proceed with just an overall sort of fire abatement cleanup to kind of get a better understanding of what's going on in there, because it's actually really hard to get in there and truly assess these trees, you know, until they're pruned and opened up and all the, you know, fire material is cleared out of the way. So those are my only other two things, I guess, between now and the next meeting. I'm not saying the cleanup has to happen, but I'm saying I think a better approach would be a cleanup first. And is that a possibility? Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think my question is, you know, I don't know if it's possible to do an independent arborist assessment or not. I would like to see some analysis of the erosion control piece, because that's mentioned in the public comments, and the applicant brought it up that, you know, the root structures will remain in the ground and it's the slope, and it's really hard to restore the territory around the exposed roots, et cetera. So it's obviously a big issue here, and I don't see a lot of information about that particular issue in the agenda packet. So I think that'd be really helpful.
Okay, so I think Commissioner Hushagan was getting ready to.
Yes, I'm going to move to continue this item to a subsequent meeting, allowing enough time for further study and examination of the issues.
I'll second that.
Okay. Could I get a roll call, please?
So just to reiterate that, so we would like to request to table this item until a subsequent NREC meeting until further to allow time for further analysis. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that motion? Any of our commissioners?
I think it would be important to add that potentially seeking out an independent arborist for evaluating the conditions of the existing trees.
Would you like an independent contractor, or would you like to have the city arborist and Southern California Edison review those?
I think, well, definitely Edison, but also
well, if I may, what I can say is you could make the motion just basically reference all of the commissioner comments, and then we can itemize those with regard to, you know, looking at alternatives and information requests from arborists. And there was also the independent assessment, and then information from the code enforcement angle. There was a handful of items that we could probably, without having you recall them through a motion and missing anything, we can probably go back and include that if you just want to generally mention your motion. That probably works.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Please reference commissioner comments.
Okay, perfect. So we are going to request to table this item till a subsequent meeting to allow time for further analysis, and then implementing comments from commissioners that was provided today regarding the trees at 1865 Hanscom Drive. Can we do a roll call?
Yes.
Who would like, and you would like to have the motion? Or who would like to move?
She already moved. He seconded. Now you conduct the roll call for us.
Okay, thank you. So we have Commissioner Hushagan.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner Siegel.
Yes.
And Commissioner Tom.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay. Well, at this point, we'd be revisiting it in the next month in our next meeting. In terms of public comment, you would have to submit another card. I apologize. You can also write in a written comment if you would like. I don't think, because you've already submitted a public comment on this, that you can do an additional one. but you can,
Yeah, and I don't know how it works as far as you like closing the item and already taking public comment.
you could submit a general public comment. Well, for next meeting, you can submit a comment, another comment on this issue.
You could submit a comment through our email at NREC Public Comment before the next commission meeting, the day of at noon, or you can do a public comment card and we can refer to it at a future meeting.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here, Michael. Is he able to, they're not able to reopen public comment? I was going to offer that also that, you know, we're obviously always open to receiving input about an issue, that we certainly consider all those comments as we process an issue, even if it's not in the public forum. So there's always an option just to, you know, raise a concern. This is exactly why we had a Zoom meeting even before we brought this forward, was to address comments from the public about a concern. So that it doesn't mean, just because it's not mentioned here in a public comment doesn't mean it gets ignored. It could be submitted and then we would consider it as a staff action.
Yeah. Sorry, let me look at the agenda. Then I'll make a decision. It looks like we still have our discussion item. I would appreciate it if you could submit it to Mr. Gerber and he can forward it on to us at a later time. Thank you. Okay. So moving on to our discussion item, plastic-free zero waste guide for city events.
Thank you so much, commissioners. Would you like copies of this PowerPoint to review, or are you okay with just viewing the screen?
Screen is fine.
I'd like a PowerPoint later. Thanks.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen of the commission. It is an honor to be before you today presenting on a topic that I'm so passionate about. This was agendized and added to the 2022 to 2023 NREC work plan some time ago. And this is merely a discussion item where we can gauge your interest and determine if you wanted to move forward with a plastic-free guide within the city. Just I'm so used to being right there. I wasn't ready to be down up here. Perfect. So why create a plastic-free or zero waste guide? Like I mentioned, we had added this to our work plan, and this would be a way for us to allow for residents and visitors to enjoy city facilities with specific restrictions on single-use plastic items that can be used at these registered events. I'm going to start with an interesting fact. More than 40% of plastic is just used once before it's discarded, which leads to serious waste issues. Currently, South Pasadena has a plastic bag ban as well as an expanded polystyrene ban. So let's see what other cities are doing currently. This is the closest to what I believe the commission is looking for, specifically in San Francisco. They have a single-use foodware plastics and litter reduction ordinance in place, and they have specific regulations for event producers of large-scale events, such as over 100 people attending these events. So what they they require for these event producers to lend or sell reusable beverage cups to attendees, and they promote or incentivize attendees to bring their own reusable beverage cups. They also have a law that requires event producers who are doing beverages to promote reusable beverage containers to at least 10% of these attendees at their events. Next, we have Carlsbad. They also have skip the stuff ban, which is basically you have to request disposable foodware in order to receive it, including condiment packets. So this way you're not just getting a handful of ketchup in your bag and not using it and then just disposing of it. They also have a ban on single-use materials. So they're banning the distribution of plastic water bottles at city planned events and city affiliated events. And then next we have Culver City. So they also have a ban on polystyrene foam and plastic food containers. In January 2022, starting this year, they banned the citywide sale of polystyrene meat and poultry trays, such as egg cartons and vegetable trays. And they are not allowing the use of plastic or PLA, which is polylactide, or a type of bioplastic that's extracted from natural sources like sugarcane or corn. These items are banned in the city and they can't use any bowls, cups, plates, or clamshells. And then starting next year, they're going to ban the use of disposable food serviceware for dine-in purposes. So you won't be able to get your drink in a plastic cup. It would have to be in their washable cups. And then they're also banning the use of polystyrene containers such as cups, bowls, plates as well. Next, we have LA County. They also passed an ordinance not only for permanent locations, but food trucks and temporary food facilities. And this is eliminating the use of single-use plastics at local restaurants. Lastly, Glendale has a disposable foodware upon request only. They call this skip the stuff. And this is similar to the other city that you can't have a handful of forks or napkins or plates just placed in your bag. You have to request and say how many you would like in order to receive that. These are just examples of what other cities are doing currently. The only one who was very similar to what we're looking for seemed to be San Francisco. And this was just an open discussion where we would look for any comments that our commissioners have and see how we would like to move forward with a zero waste guide or a plastic-free guide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay. Who would like to open up the discussion? Commissioner Law? You have any? Oh, sorry, Siegel. You have a mask on. How am I supposed to know who you are? No, I just confused your last names. That's all.
Let me look through my notes. Well, I'll pass for now.
Okay. Commissioner Tom.
I guess my first comment, I wasn't here when this discussion, when this idea of the policy came up. I guess I'm a little confused as to whether we're talking about something that's more of a guide, which is what this states, versus something that would be more mandatory in the sense of, again, like San Francisco and some of these other cities have done, doing that. I mean, and I know that even Pasadena now, I think they have the skip the stuff thing. So that it seems to me a mandate is probably better than a guide. A guide is probably a lot less useful and have a lot less impact. But I just wasn't clear on what the prior discussion was and whether there was prior, discussion that said that there was a desire for this commission to have a guide as opposed to a mandate.
If I recall correctly, I think I was the only commissioner around. It was pre-pandemic. We were discussing an ordinance or moving towards an ordinance at some point. So I think that, or whether it's a something lighter than an ordinance. I don't know.
Yeah. So for the discussion tonight, we're starting with a guide because as we know how much there's a lot of effort to undergo to actually implement an ordinance. So in trying to address some of the Green Action Plan items, we're trying to bite off a guide. And so tonight's item is about specifically a guide, but doesn't, obviously the ultimate goal is to move towards either one or more ordinances with different types of with varying types of alterations to what's allowed. So as Melody had mentioned, we already have a polystyrene ban and a plastic bag ban. And so the next logical step would be a single-use plastic ban, but we're not there yet. So this is just that first step.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this guide can act as however you'd like. We brought this to your attention so we can move forward however you would like. If you would like to even move forward, we were in my research, I was thinking that this would be a guide that's provided to people who rent city facilities or anything that's happening in a city facility, such as today. If we were providing water, we wouldn't give a plastic water bottle, for example. Or if we had food to serve, then we would have it on compostable plates. And these are just ideas and suggestions. A zero waste guide could even be as simple as having separate bins that say food waste, trash, and recycling, and then having infographics to educate. So this is anything that you would like to do with this and how you would like to move forward.
Okay, just to clarify, because previously we were looking at a ban on single-use plastics in any restaurant or food facility in the city. So we're just talking about city events. We're not talking
city events and city property. So
okay.
If somebody was to rent Garfield Park, for example, and wanted to host a 500-person event, then they would receive this guide that would say you have to buy XYZ or however you would like, whatever you would like to include in this guide. And then if they aren't to abide by the rules, either there could be a fee or something associated with that, either a larger fee. I think we were discussing having people pay more for the facility. I think that's what I recall from one of our last meetings, if they don't abide by what's in the guide.
Okay.
And you can move forward any way you all would like. This is just a discussion item.
Okay.
So I do remember that discussion. I think to me, there's sort of two angles on this, and one is more like in affecting, businesses and the way that they do business, and that's like that's your ordinance, right? That's your ban, and then there's on the other hand, sort of affecting individual consumer choices who are using city facilities or cities staff themselves when they're hosting events, and that's what the guide is about. And I think I was one of the people who sort of was saying, I don't know that we really want to say you can't have anything plastic at your kid's birthday party at Garfield Park because it is really, really challenging in our current marketplace to completely avoid, single-use plastics. It just is. And that will only change when lots of cities start passing these types of bans, right? Like I think Culver City is obviously doing a lot, and that's great. So figuring out a way to sort of, to the extent that we're trying to influence, individual consumer decisions, having that be not punitive and more educational and more like based on incentives than sort of like we have this rule and you can't have plastic and no one's going to actually go enforce it. That's, I think, where I was concerned.
I appreciate the conversation. I guess it seems like one of the ways to do this that might be more effective than a guide for exactly the reasons you just described is to figure out a way for the city to work more closely with the retailers that are the providers. I mean, you're right, for a lot of individual events, it's always a challenge, but a lot of the time the challenge can be mitigated by the retailer being in a mode where they're doing this. And so I guess I'm not sure if a guide for city events is as useful as would be something where the city reaches out to the retailers, whereas the grocery stores, the restaurants, whoever has these kinds of plastic uses or single-use plastics, and find a way to work with them. I mean, they're already in an environment where, again, the county has done some things, other adjacent cities are doing things. So I think retailers are already looking and having to say, well, I'm now dealing in an environment where I can't do certain things. If there were ways for the city to work with the retailers and say, what do you need? Or what is it that we make this transition a little bit easier? That would seem like a more hopefully productive or multiplier effect kind of impact than a city guide. Because I'm not saying a city guide wouldn't be nice. I'm just not sure how much impact it will have relative to reaching out to retailers, because the retailers are the ones who control or the ones who are really deciding a lot of this, or because they're providing what their customers want most of the time. I just don't know how that would go though in terms of reaching out to retailers. I just have the idea. I don't know how the way to implement it.
I definitely think that there's no harm in having a guide, and that one of the things that we were working on pre-pandemic was having shared reusable, cutlery and plates and cups and all that stuff for the War Memorial Building or the library room, other places in the city where events are hosted. Obviously, that's a bit more of a burden on the person who's hosting the event, but it was something that we were discussing having. I don't know if it was part of the lending library or I can't remember, but actually I wish Rona was here because she was involved in all of that. But it would be great to have a guide for city events. I absolutely agree. I don't know quite where to start with it, but I think it would be valuable for people to have that information, to know where they can access compostable stuff, or what are some solutions to, or some alternatives to plastic. I think that would be great. The only other thing I wanted to mention is the skip the stuff ban seems like a real no-brainer, even to our retailers right now. It would make their cost of business lower for sure. So I don't think there's any harm in trying to implement something like that. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Siegel?
No, I agree with the previous. I'm just a little worried that if we focus on this, takes up your guys' valuable resources to maybe go after something that's a little bit more impactful. So I don't know what the man hours would be to put towards something like this, but I would probably prefer they be put towards something that is much more impactful.
Yeah, I think my question for Ted is why are we not quite ready to do a single-use plastics ban as a city? I might have missed some discussion about that.
I don't think it's that we're not ready. It's just that that's a larger effort that we weren't bringing forward tonight. There was a state requirement earlier this year about the city naming an enforcement authority on it, and we did do that through that mandatory process. So it's not that we're not going to do it. It's just a matter of like incremental steps. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that does.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing I've seen other commissions do when they have like sort of a particular issue that warrants a lot of research is create like a smaller task force. I don't know if that's something that's been done on single-use plastics on this commission, but it might be an idea, like have a couple of members of this commission and then staff, you're passionate about it, which is awesome. We want you to do what you're passionate about. And then I don't know if there's other people in the community but there could be like a smaller task force that meets to sort of look at, like you've done, which is so helpful. What are other cities doing? What enforcement mechanisms are they using? What are the issues, that we can expect, like the types of opposition? I think that's something that might help move this along.
I know she's on maternity leave, but RP would be a good place to start because we did have some progress on this. I know that the chamber was involved. The president of the chamber was consulting with different businesses in town to get their input, trying to make it as economically feasible as possible was her biggest concern. This is for a citywide ban, obviously. But yeah, I guess I'm kind of on the same page as I think it would be probably more efficient if we try to go for the bigger picture rather than, work on just the city guide, maybe start moving forward. And also, I do have a question about enforcement because I know on some of the plastic bag, on the plastic bag ban, there are businesses in town that are definitely still using them. And what does enforcement look like? And when you had mentioned that we have state mandate on that.
Yeah, so the state mandate doesn't require, it's very interestingly worded. It doesn't require us to conduct enforcement. It required us to identify who would do the enforcement. And so we identify the city as the enforcement agent, but it doesn't require anything. It's just interestingly worded. Maybe that might change and then it becomes more stringent over time. As far as enforcement in general, um, you know, all of these fall under the code enforcement area. The resources there are very limited, so we've made that very clear, especially with all the other environmental programs that we want to see enforced. So for both that reason and just because we think it's a better approach, we've prioritized the outreach and education component of it versus the sort of punitive enforcement component of that. So I guess it's a measured approach. Like we're trying to emphasize that, but we do have plans to expand the code enforcement resources capabilities so that we can handle that element in the future. It's just a matter of there's a lot more. I don't want to say they're higher priorities, but there's a lot of space taken up with code enforcement issues in the city, and so the environmental component of that hasn't been the focus as of yet. Does that help? Okay.
Okay. Are there any other thoughts on this? Do we want to give any direction or?
I do want to say thank you for putting this together, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it does look fantastic.
Thank
and
you.
Put a lot of work into it. So did not want you to feel like we were pushing it aside.
Not at all. Not at all.
It was.
It's just a discussion item. I brought it to your attention because it was on our work plan to be brought up for this specific commission meeting. So I wanted to make sure that we're following that work plan.
I guess I wouldn't see any harm in putting together a zero waste guide as long as it's not as long as it's moving towards an eventual ordinance. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
Like the research involved in that fuels our future efforts. I think that would be sort of the right path and approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would just suggest that maybe at a future meeting and agendize another discussion item about like a task force so that we could actually, right, we need it on the agenda so we could create one maybe.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
I think there's several people on the commission who are fairly enthusiastic about this issue as well. And then, of course, we could loop in other shareholders in that. Okay.
Would anyone like to move to agendize this item for a future meeting?
Oh,
We just need to.
I'll move to agendize that item for the future meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you.
roll call, please. Do we
No.
need a roll call for agendizing? Probably.
Yeah, so I guess is the motion to agendize the discussion of the task force?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you could probably
Okay.
do that. Yeah.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Sagan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tom,
Yes.
and Commissioner Siegel.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes to return and discuss a task force at a future NRC meeting. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thank you for your time in putting this together. Okay, so now we're at the point in the meeting where we are going to approve the minutes from our September 27th meeting. Did anybody have any comments or corrections?
I had one comment, which was in my description of introducing myself. It's Cultural Heritage Commission. It just needs. I think you had it as culture and heritage. Cultural heritage. And unless anybody has any other comments, I'll move approval of the minute.
My apologies, Commissioner Tom. I'll correct that.
Okay, no problem.
Second.
Okay, can I get a roll call?
Motion to approve the minutes with one correction. The motion is done by Commissioner Tom and seconded by Commissioner Husagan. We'll do a roll call. Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Husagan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tom,
Yes.
and Commissioner Siegel.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes to approve the minutes.
Okay, we're on to communications. Mayor Cacciati. Come on up. You need to use the microphone so people on Zoom can hear you.
like to thank our public works director. Locally, what's going on with environmental issues. Ted and the police staff have really worked hard on a $500,000 grant with the MSRC or the AQMD, and they've moved the football closer past the midfield. I have 19 applications. Ted can talk about this if he wants to later, but only one was accepted for an RFP. The other 18 are going to come back and have to do a different RFP. So moving forward, hopefully within a few months, we'll get an idea if we get selected, but really positive stuff on that. Kind of regionally, things I've been involved with, representing the city. This one more local. I want to thank Mike Siegel. Just right after our meeting the following week, we had that. I let Mike talk about it during his, but just want to say I was honored to join. I think Commissioner came down from the south and from the north, and I joined the bike ride from Garfield Park to the middle to the elementary school. What a wonderful day with parents, kids, everybody involved in riding. I know Michael talked about continuing that. Just a great event. Ella, great job coming from the south. Just a wonderful day. Later that day after the bike ride, I rushed out to Mount Sac College in Walnut, and there it's funny. We again, everybody knows we were the first city in the United States to become first all electric maintenance for lawn equipment at our parks, soccer fields, facilities. And another institution is going to try to copy us. And I was there just to really encourage them. They're moving forward. They have 500 acres and they're excited about it. Dan Mabe was there from AGSA. I talked about what we did, how it was successful. Again, moving forward, I was on the phone with facilities manager at Alhambra High School, all their facilities. We'll be meeting with them in a few weeks. Unfortunately, they'll beat us to be the first school in the San Gabriel Valley to go all electric if they do it. All the other meetings I attended a monthly Foothill Gold Line Construction Authority meeting at, the next 4-station, 9.1 mile construction from where it ends right now at Azusa, Glendora, crosses at 210 across under the 57 right into beautiful downtown San Dimas. Never been there. It's a beautiful Western motif. Can't wait till the train gets there. And then into beautiful downtown Laverne and to the northern part of Pomona by co-terminus with the Metrolink station. Still trying to get state money or federal money to get it out to Claremont and Montclair, but that's getting tougher. But everything's on time, on budget for like a January, February 2025 opening. So excited there. Attended a monthly LA County Sanitation District meeting. Typical things, sanitation, but the big thing there is a pure water project, whether that be the largest kind of recycling project, combination between Metropolitan Water District, LA County Sanitation District. Also attended a monthly AQMD meeting. Just to let you know, I try to set the example for all the board members on there, and I'm the only one that takes mass transit to the meetings. We're shooting an electric car, but I turned mine in 8 years ago. So I leave every day. We meet, I go there a couple times a month. I sit on, chair this legislative committee, investment oversight. But these meetings always take public transit, set the example. So I leave my house at 6:20, either ride a bike or drive the car to the Gold Line station. Since they took out our bus, the 176 on Mission, I can't take that. I can't walk right there. So I'll take the train to Azusa, the terminus of the Gold Line right now. I'll get there about 6:40 something, wait about 15 minutes for the Foothill Transit. I take that bus to Punta Hills Mall, wait there for 10 or 15 minutes. Hopefully I make the connection. If I don't, I call someone to pick me up. And then from there, I take the final bus, which drops me off right in front of AQMD and the Diamond Bar City Hall. So it takes 2 hours and 30 minutes by 3 levels. That's the fastest. I've tried everything from Metrolink, riding a bike, 3 buses, everything. This is the fastest way to get there. And finally, a really exciting thing happened was I attended the monthly meeting of the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, which goes from basically us, Sierra Madre, all the way out to Ventura and to Ventura County. And this month, really exciting. We got a $10 million grant from the governor. We 100%, I made the motion actually, and we're going to purchase or have the option to purchase the largest piece of undeveloped coastal land, undeveloped, from the Mexican border to San Luis Obispo, basically Santa Barbara County north. It's 12 miles of coastline, 1,289 acres. It was in bankruptcy. So the governor got the money down. So it's exciting. Sometime I'll bring you pictures. It's just fabulous. It'll be open space forever. A park just about 2 or 3 miles north of the LA County Ventura line, going north 12 miles. It goes inland so imagine about 120 Garfield parks lined up straight. That's what it's going to be. It's just beautiful. And then well, finally got an email just a little while ago. We have a right to vote on the San Gabriel Basin, and Ted would know this in antenna much better than me or people in water. San Gabriel Basin Water Quality Authority. We have pumping rights, prescriptive rights. So we get a vote on an alternate member, and we're getting pushed from several cities like Alhambra, El Monte, Whittier. They want us to vote for them. So we have a vote as a council. Each 10,000 people counts as one vote. So that's coming up too. And they clean up all the groundwater contamination in our basin. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, now moving on to my commissioner communications. Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you. 2 items quickly. Ted, you probably saw I sent you some potential grants. I don't know if AQMD has anything to do with the Port of Long Beach. I assume so, but maybe you can get some guidance from Mayor Cacciatti on that one. And then thank you, Mayor, for attending the bike bus we had on Bike to School Day. We had 40 to 50 kids and probably 20 adults at 3 different elementary schools bike together in a bike bus down to the elementary school. It was a lot of fun heading down. We had some issues on the way back as a lot of parents and kids did not participate on the secondary trip. So we have a few things to work out, but we've got a lot of feedback that it was a blast and people want to keep doing it. And so we've got the next one for November 8th. And then we're going to try and make it so that we can just have a steady, consistent date monthly. So we're going to try and do the first Tuesday of the month starting in December. A few kinks to work out. So we'll be working on that over the next several months. But the hope is that we do this consistently enough and people will just show up because they know it's there. And pretty soon everyone's riding their bike to school. Thanks.
Commissioner Tom.
Nothing.
Nothing from you. Okay, Commissioner Hushagen.
I just had a thought that I like, which is that I think it would be cool. I know we're coming close to SPEF yard sign season. Everyone's gonna get their SPEF sign because they donated. And we have these great rebates available to people who are doing turf removal. I wondered if there's a possibility that we could do yard signs that are like, turf removal in process or biodiverse garden coming or something, just to let people know, like when your lawn is dying, that it's not like a reason to call for code enforcement, for example. And I think that there's like a real peer pressure power in those SPEF lawn signs. Anyway, something that maybe some discretionary funds by a council member could perhaps fund signs, see if we can get a few going. And that's my proposal.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thanks to Commissioner Siegel for putting together the bike bus. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed seeing my fellow commissioner jog alongside her daughter on the bike because she had the best workout of all of us. That's all I wanted to say. Those are my only comments. Yes, it's your.
Does Commissioner Tom have any comments? Were you able to? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for staff liaison communications, I'll just add a couple things. So as Mayor Cacciatti had mentioned, a few months ago, well, it's probably longer than that now, but the MSRC, the Mobile Source Reduction Committee, had offered a program opportunity notice to gather proposals basically from various agencies, various cities about a transformative air quality improvement grant. And our city put together a very comprehensive package related to the infrastructure and the fleet electrification efforts at City Hall. So we talked about the solar panel installation, the battery backup installation that we're planning for City Hall, the conversion of police fleet vehicles to electric. We put a distributed stormwater project in there, and that was something that the commission here was interested in pursuing. And then also the charging infrastructure for all of that. So as the mayor had mentioned, MSRC took a look at all the applications, and there was quite a few. A number of them were related to transit, but ours was related to specific electrification of vehicles. And they had a number of asks, like requirements of the proposal. And we were the only city selected that actually met all of the requirements, in that it's a, very obvious air quality and pollution reduction initiative. That's transformative, in that it's not just repeating something that's been done before, but it's a whole new a concept, a whole new dynamic. And so those were some of the major elements there. What MSRC was really interested in was that the fact that we were dedicated to not just converting administrative vehicles to electric, but actually patrol vehicles that would be used in the field for patrol. And that was something that they had not seen before. And so we were selected to send a more formal proposal where other cities for their transit requests were guided into an RFP process, where MSRC basically put out a standard request for proposals that anybody could apply to. We were invited to submit a sole source proposal, meaning directly to South Pasadena to submit a proposal for a grant up to $500,000 to pay for the patrol vehicle implementation, also charging infrastructure. So that's a really fantastic opportunity. So we're in the midst of putting together those materials now. And we're pretty confident that we'll be successful as long as we meet all the requirements of that request. So that was very exciting. The only other items I was going to mention is I know there was an interest in understanding what other commissions were evaluating. And so there was an opportunity for sort of an engagement on other items that are related to this commission. So the MTech met last month. We didn't have any particular action or discussion items. We had a lot of, we had a very long review of all the ongoing transportation projects and basically a status update. So we went through street resurfacing and some bicycle lane implementation items, some of the other larger CIP projects, including the new installations we've made to upgrade the traffic controller and detector hardware along Fair Oaks. So that project is almost done. And so the next phase of that project is what we call our Rogan funded project, these Rogan funds. And it will be actually to enhance some of those intelligent transportation systems along Fair Oaks. And then we're also hoping to make some, whatever is it within the federal highway scope, to make some structural changes along Fair Oaks. And so that scope is being worked out right now. And we're hoping to have a public outreach session at our next Transportation Commission in November to really nail down exactly what that scope is going to look like for those future improvements along Fair Oaks. For the Public Works Commission, we only meet every other month, so we haven't met since it's October. So I think we met in September. We're meeting again in November. So they have a different type of work plan because it's only 6 months, 6 meetings a year. So we're planning on looking at either the design work that's happening for our Arroyo Seco stormwater project, or if the information is ready, looking at some of the results of the seismic and structural evaluation of the West Side Reservoir. We don't have that agenda quite worked out for November for the Public Works Commission. So just a little window into what the other commissions are working on as requested. Thank you so much.
Quick question. So on the stormwater and Arroyo project, when was the community outreach going to be for that one again, for the various items that might be included in the park area?
Sure. So this is a little complicated because there's so many projects. So there's, I guess if you were to itemize them all, there'd be 6 projects along the Arroyo. So we're talking about the very north one, which is a shared project with Pasadena. So it's partially in San Rafael. It's partially in that wooded area in San Pascual, which is west of the baseball fields. So we haven't yet, for the rest of the projects that are in the soccer field area and the golf course area and the driving range and the nature park, those ones are we're still seeking funding So we're going through the Measure W evaluation process now. So the initial public outreach for that conceptual was held last year, and we don't have anything planned for those yet until we have a better sense of what the funding is. But for the ongoing project, which is in the design phase for the San Pasquale, we had some early public outreach a few months ago, but I think we're planning another one soon. So I can keep the commission apprised as that project. And the idea would be, once we have a better idea of what that one is a wetland, of how the wetland's going to be built, we can come back with a conceptual design of what type of amenities are there, and the performance of that project and that kind of thing. So we're about a 60% design. So I can announce the next public outreach. Keep you posted on that one when that comes back. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Did you have any comments?
Hi, everyone. So I have a few updates. The open house on October 2nd was a success. We had over 95 people participate in the electric lawn equipment raffle, and we had 3 winners. It was really great event. It was the first time I did any public outreach for South Pasadena, and it was so great meeting all of our wonderful residents. I wanted to let everyone know that we have a free compost giveaway this Saturday at the Arroyo Seco Golf Course parking lot. It will be free for all South Pasadena residents, and you're limited to how much you can take, but there is a lot to choose from. And then I also wanted to reiterate that there are rebates for residents and commercial businesses that are still available. And lastly, I wanted to thank everyone who came today via Zoom and in person. I know your time is valuable, and we really appreciate you for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just have a couple additional upcoming events, as Melanie's mentioned. The compost giveaway is a must attend. And that's on October 29th from 9 to 12 in the Arroyo Seco parking lot. As usual, there's the smart gardening workshops put on by the county. There's a link in our agenda. I guess there's an upcoming one on November 19th from 10 to 11:30 a.m. And there's a lot of upcoming gardening webinars through their org as well. And there is a Metropolitan Water District turf removal and California native landscape webinar through the link provided in the agenda. And so without further ado, I would like to adjourn this meeting at 9:54. Sorry, 8:54. Phew, I was going to say, where did that hour go? I know.